Bush is going to join us here on stage to talk about freedom. We love freedom. How do we feel about freedom? We feel great about it. And frankly, that's all I'm going to say because he's going to say the rest. Come on up here, John Bush. Give it up for Mr. John Bush.
How is everybody today? Y'all feeling good? Feeling free? Look free. What a great place to be. I just want to thank Alex for inviting me to present at this awesome event. And I also want to shout out Sovereignty Ranch. What a great venue. Give it up for the folks that own this property. Hanging out here. All right. So my goals for this talk, I want to share with you guys about the Freedom Cell Network. Is there anybody in the audience that's part of the Freedom Cell Network? All right. That's my crowd. All right, so for the rest of you, I need to do a better job of spreading the word, and hopefully you guys will be excited to join this collaborative movement of free people that are working together to create real freedom, prosperity, and community in their lives. I also want to paint a picture of what the future could look like, actually what the future will look like, especially if each and every one of us step into our true power, step out of a state of victimhood, complaining, step out of fear and anxiety, and step into a place of empowerment. Because I confidently believe that if enough of us exit the systems that we disagree with and build new systems, that we could achieve liberty in our lifetime. Does that sound like a laudable goal that you guys want to hop on board with? All right. At least not if in our lifetime, maybe our kids or grandkids or great-grandkids. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance, but what I'm hoping to convey today is that the more proactive we are, the more we take responsibility for changing the world into our own hands instead of abrogating it to politicians, then I think that we can really turn the tide. So, my name's John. I hail from Austin, Texas, although I got out of Austin, I was going to say as fast as I could, but it took about 38 years. Now we live in Bastrop County, just east of Austin. We have a 10-acre homestead. I'm joined by my lovely wife and my two kiddos. They're amazing. Give it up, ladies and gentlemen. So we have a 10-acre homestead. It's an intentional community. We have 3 people that live there that are part of our tribe, part of our family, really. And really big fan of the country, especially here in the great state of Texas. As I'll share, the quality of life you have and the freedom that you experience has a lot to do with where you live. And so for those of you that are in a more authoritarian area, we welcome you here to Texas, especially the Californians. Let's talk to Mr. California. There's a lot of Californians moving to Central Texas. We'll take the ones that care about freedom and bodily autonomy, and the rest of them, we'll just sit in traffic with them. All right, so I, quote unquote, woke up. You never truly wake up, right? And then when you say that, I woke up, I'm ascended, then you kind of miss the point, right? But I was red-pilled back in 2002. I caught a documentary by old Alex Jones. We have Alex Jones fans? Hit or miss sometimes with that guy, but he sure has laid the groundwork for a lot of people. And boy, I tell you what, he sure is right way more than he's wrong. 9/11 Road to Tyranny. Anybody seen that one? We got 9/11 truthers. Remember Building 7 minutes? All right, I'm in good company. So I watched that documentary, totally blew my mind, and I was like, whoa, the government's been lying to us. In fact, I remember the morning of 9/11. I used it as an excuse to like sleep in and not go to school, kind of not sure what was going on, but quickly realized this was a really big deal. And then when I learned that the government, I wasn't going to say my government, but to be honest, I completely reject the authority that this government tries to place upon me. I do not consent to be governed by this system. That being said, I feel grateful that I was born in the United States and in the state of Texas, because a lot of the ideas that we share would have us locked in a gulag if we were born in another time or another place. So it's all about our attitude, right? Gratitude really makes a big difference. But we shouldn't rest on our laurels or be content with the status quo. So I have like 50 minutes to talk, so we're going to go on these little side quests and diatribes, and you guys are just going to get a stream of consciousness right from my crazy brain. So, caught this documentary, completely woke me up, and it was like, oh my goodness, I went down the rabbit hole, learning about the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Trilateral Commission, and the Bilderberg Group, and the Milner Group, and this whole diabolical conspiracy to create a totalitarian technocratic government. And it really changed my life.
And I was extremely motivated to change everything that I could. So we did the 9/11 Truth thing. You know, back then we would burn DVDs and pass them out on street corners. I think nowadays people are like, what the heck is this little shiny thing? And why are you handing me a psychedelic mirror? No, there's a prison on there. But we were passing them out, trying to reach people, and you know, back then, talking about 9/11 Truth was definitely a lot more challenging than nowadays. A lot of people get it now, but back then there was all this patriotic fervor, and so that didn't really get me anywhere. It wasn't very satisfying because people were just upset with us and angry with us. Started to learn about the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights in college. Started an ACLU chapter there. Done some good things, but they're a little weird, a little lefty. And it wasn't until I learned about the Ron Paul for President campaign. I'm sure I got some Ron Paul fans here. Right, so in 2007, I learned about the good Dr. Ron Paul, and all of a sudden, these ideas that I had about what government should be like and what the relationship between individuals and government should be like, it had a name. It was called libertarianism. So I started studying libertarianism and got involved after the Ron Paul campaign in political action. We started a political action committee called Texans for Accountable Government. And we actually had some pretty big victories. For example, in the city of Austin, the police officers were on the verge of being trained to do phlebotomies. They would do blood withdrawals on the side of the road if you were suspected of a DWI. So we got all of our local crew together, we dressed up like vampire cops, and we paraded around with big fake syringes. Anyway, we managed to stop that from happening. But of course, they just had nurses at the jail do it. But it was definitely much preferable to the police officers doing it on the side of the road. There's this institution known as fusion centers. Anybody know what a fusion center is? Okay. Well, a fusion center is a multi-jurisdictional law enforcement information gathering and intelligence sharing system that seeks to merge local, state, federal law enforcement. There's one in just about every single county, every city, and this is something that was brought about after 9/11. Before that, after the Oklahoma City bombing, that's where the Joint Terrorism Task Force came. Well, essentially, these are law enforcement centers that keep tabs on potential threats, terror threats, but they also started keeping tabs on freedom people. There was a fusion center in Texas, or in Missouri, called the Missouri Information Analysis Center. They put out a report about the modern militia movement. And we should be worried and afraid of these crazy modern militia people. You might recognize them if they have Ron Paul bumper stickers, or they think that income tax is a lie, and all this stuff. That was a big eye-opener, so went around the country educating people about this, and back in the state we actually had a piece of legislation passed that instituted a privacy policy for all 7 or 8 fusion centers in the state of Texas. And it said you can't gather information or share information of a political, religious, or social view. Now, fast forward several years, and an anonymous hacker group hacked into some of these fusion centers and come to find out that my name was in one of these fusion centers for hosting a meeting about the Freedom Cell Network, this group that we had. Now, I could tell you it's like they were tracking me and it's all subversive, but in reality it was a cop that put me in this threat liaison office report thing. And me and the cop had a beef. I think it was more like a little personal vendetta. But anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is while we had what seemed as political victories, we passed this legislation in Austin, and actually like a bill that I helped to author got passed in the state of Texas. In reality, we were not creating greater freedom for ourselves. We were simply slowing the growth of tyranny. And that was not satisfactory for me. It was around this time that, you know, there's this expression, what's the difference between a libertarian and an anarchist? You know? Like 2 or 3 months, depending on how much you're reading. So anyway, I learned about this guy Murray Rothbard, and from there I learned about agorism. Are you guys familiar with agorism? It's this idea that instead of competing within the system, we should compete with the system and create entirely new systems, right? So around this time I started deciding like, hey, if we're gonna create freedom in this world, we gotta do it ourselves. We need to start exploring alternative institutions or parallel systems. So we would go to farmers markets and encourage the vendors to accept silver dimes, quarters, half dollars, 1964, and earlier like 90% silver, so they still have a substantial silver content, and the goal was to decouple away from the Fed. The Federal Reserve, right? So Ron Paul's like, and the Fed, let's audit the Fed, That absolutely got nowhere, although there was some awareness, so we can't argue with that. But I was thinking, if we want to end the Fed, then we need to limit our use of Federal Reserve notes and start trading amongst ourselves and using alternatives. Now, it was around this time, shortly thereafter, that I learned about Bitcoin. We have some Bitcoin fans in the audience? Some people probably like Bitcoin's part of the New World Order. I don't know about this John Bush guy. I do not believe that it is. It's possible, however, extremely unlikely. They'd most definitely be shooting themselves in the foot if that was the case. You know, I remember my kiddos, they don't have social security numbers, so I'm trying to do what I can to set the stage for them to be way more sovereign than I ever had the chance to be. Except they're like, Dad, this is kind of weird. I'm like, you can get your social whenever you want. Anyway, I remember my dad saying, you know, John, whenever they get old, how are they going to get a bank account? And this was back in 2011 or 2012, just right before I learned about Bitcoin. I said, well, you know, by the time they come of age, I have a feeling the free people of this world are going to create this decentralized money system that we can use that's completely outside of the government control. And so, of course, we have that now with Bitcoin or privacy coins like Monero. So, for about 10 years or so, maybe 13 or so, I've been educating people about using these alternatives. I'm a firm believer that there's enough people right now that understand the tyranny and treachery that's going on in the world. If we simply shifted our tactics away from engaging with the state, away from yelling at government buildings, it's one of my old favorite pastimes, yelling at government buildings, but didn't change much except for a sore throat. That's an Alex Jones thing too, with bullhorn. He takes me crazy. Yeah, just keep on yelling, it's gonna change the world. I got the documents right here. So, I'm a firm believer. I realized this back in 2008 when I saw how many votes Ron Paul got, and then being an activist in Central Texas with huge communities of freedom-loving, truth-loving people. I just really think that if we all took the time and we analyzed our activities and we tried our absolute best, while it may be inconvenient at times, to live as consistently with the philosophy of liberty as we can, like Samuel Edward Konkin said, he's the guy that came up with this strategy of agorism I'll talk about more. The consistent application of the philosophy of liberty is what creates the free society. And like, just to throw something out, because I really appreciate Alec, because he's like banging on these voluntarism ideas, and there's still a lot of people that believe in government. But at the end of the day, people are like, government's supposed to protect life, liberty, and property. We just need to go back to how it used to be. It never actually was like that. And it's kind of a paradox for an institution that's supposed to protect life, liberty, and property. In order for it to exist, it has to violate life, liberty, and property through taxation in order to even to operate, right? And so I just want to encourage people to think outside the box when it comes to how we organize ourselves as a social community. That's what has been ingrained in us with the Pledge of Allegiance, with the adoration of all of these presidents, many of whom have engaged in massive atrocities, fraud, and lies. There's this great quote by Napoleon Hill, and it's that which the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. And so I'm always conceiving of a better world, a world where human beings relate to one another in a voluntary way, where all of our interaction and our relationships and our contracts are mutually beneficial. Nobody's coerced and manipulated into engaging in something. And where we trade outside the system with alternative currencies that aren't completely debased. Does anybody ever get frustrated with the fact that we're all forced to use, like through legal tender laws, this dollar, and it's just being completely inflated and manipulated and used to finance foreign wars of aggression and meddle in other countries' affairs, and all the money's getting shipped off to Ukraine, and then if you're an entrepreneur or a business person, you're trying to make economic decisions about what's going to be like in the future, and it's just like, isn't that frustrating, right?
Yep.
But we keep on using it like we're addicted to it somehow. I understand paying taxes or whatnot. Maybe someday if there's enough of us, we can opt out of that too, right? In fact, it's easier to opt out of the income tax than it is the property tax. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of little magic you can do with the income tax, and avoiding it altogether is even easier than having a piece of land and just saying no. But we'll talk about some solutions for that as well. So I just want to encourage people to think outside the box. And now that we have decentralized technologies, now that we have encrypted internet communications, now that we have a global community of people that think like we do and that respect sovereignty, I do think it's time that we considered an alternative path forward. And I feel extremely confident that if there's enough people that join this mission or committed to this mission, that we can create a better world for the future generations that are yet to be born. And in order to help facilitate this transition to a stateless society full of peace and freedom, and I'm not talking about a utopia here, because people are weird and people got little issues, and if we don't all do the inside work to heal ourselves, then we're simply going to recreate more problems for one another. But I strongly believe that there is a path, and in order to facilitate this and accelerate this transition, we started the Freedom Cell Network. So the Freedom Cell Network was an idea. Freedom Cells I came up with back in 2014, 2015. This was around the time I was starting to realize, like, wow, there's another way to live, and there's this radical philosophy of anarchism and voluntarism. It just means without rulers, no hierarchy. We're not forced to do things against our will. And I started asking myself, well, why are there so many people now that understand freedom, but we're still not living free? And we're still getting the driver's license. I struggled with that one. I tried to do the whole right to travel thing. I understand there's a lot of folks in this audience that are doing like the sovereignty through law and lawful means, and let's file this paperwork and capital letters over here and there, right? I've experimented with some of that in my life, and I came to realize that no matter how lawful it is, more often than not, the judges just don't give a damn because they do not stand with honor and they don't honor their oath of office, and frankly, most of them don't even read the law. And so I tried to do the right to travel thing, and it's like, I'm not in transportation, I'm simply in my personal conveyance, I'm not doing commercial activity. I looked up the transportation code. I tell you what, a motor vehicle is a carrier is an object that moves goods or persons for a fee, and that's not what I'm doing. And of course the prosecutor in his closing statement said, everything this man said today, he just looked it up on Google, don't even believe anything that he said. And the jury found me guilty. And I realized it was slave-on-slave violence. If that guy doesn't have to have a driver's license, then why do I? Guilty, right? A lot of stuff doesn't matter, and it's unfortunate. So I just want to encourage people to be aware, like, yeah, there are lawful means of making our lives better or trying to establish or assert, and if we get dragged into some courtroom for this, that, or the other, obviously we should put up a fight. But I do believe that there is another way forward. So just throwing that out there. So the Freedom Cell Network came up with this idea, like, why are we not living free? And I understand that people live in fear, and we try to be as free as possible. And practically speaking, if you get yourself out of the big cities and you're out in the country, especially in a great place like Texas, you're pretty damn free. And the more rural you are, the more the bureaucrats and the government just doesn't seem to care, nor do they have the resources to bother you, especially if you're a good person and you're an upstanding member of the community, the business community or whatever. It's proven out in Bastrop County for us. I have a friend named Curtis Stone. Somebody familiar with Curtis Stone? Yeah. So he's up in Canada, and I did this interview with him, and I was like, well, you know, you're talking about all this freedom, but you're in Canada, you know, Trudeau. I mean, come on, how free can you really be? He's like, man, I'm up in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, Canada. There's hardly anybody that lives around me. I'm great friends with my neighbor. I never even engage with the government at all. He's another one that does a lot of that sovereignty stuff, and they actually came to mess with him for one thing, and he pushed back with all these letters, and this is my fee that I'm going to charge hourly or whatever, and they left him alone. So maybe you just got to be a thorn in their side, and they'll go bully on someone else that's an easier victim. But regardless, he's out in the middle of nowhere, and I tell you what, there's a lot more freedom when you're out in the country. And it's a more conservative, independent lifestyle, good people that are there to support one another. It's a dramatically different lifestyle. I recommend for everybody. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are already living in the country or got yourself a nice Texas ranch. So, the Freedom Cell Network. I'm like, why are these people not living free? I know there's fear. I know that we have been conditioned to accept arbitrary authority. What is the missing piece? What's missing that can help us to create these free societies? And I really centered it down on the strength in numbers. Unity. There's strength in numbers. Unity 2, people that care about freedom need to unite and support one another, because the lone wolf standing up, it's a lot easier for him to get crushed, but the people united will never be defeated, right? So that's where this idea for the Freedom Cell Network came from. Around that same time, I was exploring, like, okay, well, how do we organize? Because I've done a lot of organizations and groups and political action committees, and they always seem to, like, get all conflicted with interpersonal drama and conflict, or somebody takes over and they're like a total a-hole and it just turns into all sorts of problems. How can we avoid that if we are to bring people together? And this is when I started exploring the idea of small groups. So there was a guy named Nick Ludwig, and he actually wrote this small group manual, and he was exploring how different groups throughout civilization have used small groups to organize. There were Christians that did missionaries in small groups so they wouldn't be persecuted. Even the Soviets during the Bolshevik Revolution, they had these little Soviets, little small groups where they would go push communism. And he started promoting, let's do small groups. Also around this time, Stuart Rhodes, you guys know Oath Keepers? Fortunately, he's locked up right now for involvement with the whole January 6th thing, but at the time, I was following his work, and he was saying we shouldn't have this national movement, we need to have these local chapters that's more decentralized. It's less vulnerable to attack, right? So small group, small group. And then there's a guy named Bob Podolsky. He recently passed away, so rest in peace, Bob Podolsky. But he wrote this book called Flourish. And him and a gentleman named John David Garcia, they did scientific research that found 8 people, a group of 8 people is the optimal number of people for maximum creativity. So I'm exploring 8 people. Let's see how I'm doing here. So 8 people, the idea behind the Freedom Cell Network is get together with approximately 8 people. Doesn't have to be 8 exactly, it could be 6, it could be 10, it could be whatever. But get together with a group of small group of people and start working together on freedom goals. Okay? What do those goals look like? Hey, let's make sure that we all have 3 months worth of food storage. I used to encourage people to have at least 2 weeks worth of food storage. And then we actually had to tap into our food storage during COVID, and I was like, whoa, I didn't think that one was gonna happen this fast. You know, I haven't done this for 20 years, and always telling people, like, we gotta wake people up to stop the New World Order. One day there's gonna be this New World Order, totalitarian government, we gotta wake people up. And then COVID happened, it was like, whoa, this is in our face now. I thought it was gonna be some far off thing. Most adults just passed the buck to the kiddos. I thought they were gonna have to worry about it, but now here it is right in our face, lockdowns, mandates, vaccine passports, digital ID, central bank digital currencies. We're living in some crazy times, folks. But I for sure am grateful to be alive in these times, because I think out of great adversity comes major transitions and changes. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for being a part of this transition. We're doing God's work, and it's really critical that we're all alive at this moment so we can embrace this big change, right? So COVID happened, accelerated, crazy town, and it really made it more clear why all this work is so much more important, right? Okay, so you get together, work on goals, having food storage, make sure everybody knows how to defend themselves in their households, make sure everybody has a bug out plan, maybe you bug out together, maybe you bug out separate, but just make sure everybody's working on these goals together. Try to have encrypted communication, maybe even off-grid communication, ham radio, whatever it may be. Those are just some core basic like preparedness goals you can work on with your Freedom Crew, but it can go whatever direction you want. Maybe it's a spiritual group that gets together and they do Bible study and they pray together. Or it's a spiritual group that gets together and does meditation and yoga. Or it's families that get together and they're like, all right, well, we're gonna have a date night little group here, and so on this Friday, you guys are gonna watch the kids, so me and the wife can go on a date, or it's a homeschool pod, homeschool co-op, bringing the kids together for play dates, whatever it may be, right? Maybe it's a workout thing, maybe it's a fitness thing. The idea is get together with freedom-minded people and work together on goals to create greater freedom and resiliency for you and your crew. Growing food, of course, is a really important one as well. But it doesn't just stop with the small group. Here's how we can leverage this concept and transition and actually use it to build the infrastructure for a completely free society. You take your small group of approximately 8 and you connect with other groups of 8. And now we have maybe 8 groups of 8. Again, it doesn't have to play like that. It doesn't always play out exactly like that. But let's say we have a small crew. So for example, we have we call it an inner cadre. Myself, my wife, Brad, who's on our property, Ryan, who's on our property, Tanya, who's on our property, and our good friend Emilio. You know, you can count the kiddos as one of those 8 or not. It doesn't really matter very much. Again, just get together with a small group. And so that's our little inner cadre. But then we're part of a larger group that's in Bastrop County. And there's like 120 or so people in Bastrop County. That's what we call a middle cadre, okay? But that Bastrop County group is then connected with the other groups that are scattered throughout Central Texas. And we call the Central Texas group, which has about 600 to 700 people. I should say 600 to 700 on a Telegram group. Not all of them always show up, right? But it's better for marketing purposes to go with that number. Yeah. So there's around 600 or 700, but I don't know, maybe 20 or 30% of those people who actually show up, or they're doing things in their area. And so we're all connected. And we get together regularly as a big group. We share ideas, do little workshops. But the smaller county groups and even smaller groups, they're regularly connecting and working on each other's gardens and bringing the kids together and going to the gun range and practicing self-defense stuff, right? And so when we explore this idea, when we institute this idea, a whole world of possibilities opens up to us. Let's say you live in downtown. So there's a downtown Austin Freedom Cell, a South Austin, a Hayes County, a hill country, a far hill country, a far right hill country. That's where all the Nazis go. Just no Nazis. Although that's what Southern Poverty Law Center wants you to think. They once did a write-up on me to talk about Agenda 21. And they like used to be in the Kleinbeck and Phyllis Schlafly. Anybody know who that is? Okay, so we have a Williamson County group. So let's say you're in downtown Austin, and obviously there's not a lot of farms or gardens out in downtown Austin. A lot of the things east, and there's little farms. There's tons of people in our community that live on farms. Not just like we got the garden in the backyard, but they have farms. So you have like trade routes, right? So you got the farmer over here in Bastrop County, and then you have somebody that lives in Bastrop County, they work in downtown Austin. They're connected with the people in the downtown cells, so maybe when they're driving into work, they can bring the community-supported agriculture share to the people downtown, right? Or we can share communication with one another. We can engage in mutual aid if there is some kind of problem, right? So Central Texas, we're very connected. We have one of the larger groups, but there's also a huge group in Houston. Mexico's very organized. Australia has a giant community. Canada has a giant community. Europe has a lot of people there in the various countries. There was even a group in North Korea. They're no longer with us, but that's a joke. They're not a group in North Korea, no. There should be though. Does anybody want to volunteer to infiltrate North Korea? He's a good citizen, so believe it all. He's a Biden voter over here. Okay, all right. Okay, so that's the Freedom Cell Network in a nutshell. That's like the framework, the concept. There's now over 40,000 people that participate globally. And it's all a bunch of good people. There are some weirdos, right? I'm sure half of the crowd's pretty weird in here. That's what I tell my kids, like when they're feeling anxious or shy, myself too. It's like, don't worry. I know you might be feeling a little anxious or weird. You're saying something funny. Everybody else is weird as hell too. We're all just a bunch of weirdos saying weird stuff. And let's just be graceful with each other. So there's 40,000 people. We created a website. Anybody can join for free. freedomcells.org. Freedom cells, like cells in the body. Although freedom cells. So freedomcells.org, you register on the website, you put an address. Don't put your home address though, for security purposes. Maybe you put a park down the street, the coffee shop down the road. And when you join the website, you can pull up the member map or the cell map. And chances are, if you live in a mid to large city, there's gonna be people in your area. And those people in your area, they're on the map as well, and they're expressing, hey, I'm interested in meeting up and getting together and doing some cool freedom stuff. So there's a lot of people that we've heard from, for example, especially during COVID, they felt completely lost. Folks in New York, the lockdowns were taking place, the kids were out of school and they were like isolated. And you know why a lot of people freaked out during that time, both within our community and just mainstream societies, because everybody was mostly at home. I mean, we weren't at home, of course. I'm sure you guys didn't stay at home all the time, but there was less stuff to do because a lot of places were closed down. Right? Not in Bandera, Texas, though. And so people were forced to be at home and watch the TV and get all mesmerized and brainwashed. And people in our community were at home watching the computer getting mesmerized and brainwashed by a bunch of fear propaganda. You know, the media that you consume creates your reality. So I really want to encourage people. I know there's folks in our freedom community that are like totally freaked out. And you talk to them and they're like wide-eyed and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you're talking to all these people like this, and you have Telegram messages and they're gonna come get you. I used to work for the government, and they're like all freaked out. And I'm like, man, you need to spend some time in the garden, hanging out with people. Because if you're watching conspiracy documentaries on Rumble all day that are talking about how the government has infected every single aspect of our lives, and the deep state, and the psychopaths, and the pedophile elite, and blah, 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 then that's what your world is going to be. But if you're out at an event like this, mixing it up, eating some grass-fed beef, dancing to DJ Mike Winter, bringing back the hits from the 60s and 70s, yeah, then life's gonna be great. And you're gonna be like, you know what, in spite of all the tyranny and technocracy in the world, I've never felt more free in my life.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going after, and it all has to do with the mindset that we have, okay? So that's the Freedom Cell Network in a nutshell. I want to invite everybody to join and take up the banner to help us expand this network, because I do believe that the infrastructure is set up in a way that we can scale. We have 40,000 people right now, right? Now it's loose, right? And you know, people are just getting together and meeting up and talking. But I want to take this and leverage another Napoleon Hill concept from Think and Grow Rich. That's organized effort. So you got all these different people with these different ideas, but if we can come together and leverage that momentum and have like a magnifying glass where it intensifies our activity and our attention based on what we focus, we could really replace big government and big mega corporations as a means of providing for our wants and needs. We do business with one another. We go to the healthcare provider within the community. The kids are raised together. We're eating from the farmer down the road. We're hiring people, right? Like, so I got this company called Live Free Academy. We have 14, 15 people that work for us, full-time or part-time. Every single one of them is a freedom person, and most of them I met through the Freedom Cell Network, right? So, you know, so they're not have to worry about any mandates or vaccine mandates or anything like that. I do require a drug test, though. And if they pass the drug test, meaning they're clean, they gotta go. They can't work. Always gotta work that one in there. I got like some little jokes that I pull out every once in a while. That one always kills. Some of them don't, and they go to the graveyard of jokes. So I strongly believe that with a little bit more energy and leadership and organization, we can actually create an institution that helps us to live free. It protects us. Maybe someday we pull our resources together and we hire private security forces, or the retired military folks and the retired law enforcement in the community. They actually serve as a protection agency for our community, to protect us from private criminals, and more importantly, someday to protect us from public criminals, because those are the ones that we all should be worried about. The private criminals, you can, here in Texas especially, you can defend yourself, and probably the county's gonna be like, yeah, well, that's the Castle Doctrine, or, you know, good job, son, right? But a public criminal, one that's corrupt, it's not the same, and we're not gonna get into what that all looks like, because my phone's here listening to us. Yeah, join the Freedom Cell Network. So, I'm really hopeful that what we've built, can really help people. And I just want to share a little bit more too to encourage folks. So again, freedomcells.org, there's a takeaway, an action item. If you're not part of the network, I hope that you'll join, see if there's people in your area. Now, of course, you may put yourself on the map and be like, what the heck was that guy talking about? He said there were so many people, there's nobody in my area. That means that we're relying on you to be a leader, to create a group, because there's other people that join the website. They're like, there's no one in my area, this is all BS, those guys sure pitch it pretty hard, but there's nothing going on. There's other people that are doing the same thing. So all it takes is one person to raise their hand and say, hey, I'll be a leader, I'll organize a meetup, let's get together at the local coffee shop, let's get together at Sovereignty Ranch or whatever, and let's plan some freedom stuff. Let's do some cool freedom stuff, okay? So join the group, be a part of it, and let's change the world. Now, there's another great quote from Napoleon Hill, big Napoleon Hill fan. In fact, the more that I obsess with success literature and philosophy and marketing and all that stuff, and the more self-reflection that we engage in, the greater success that we have in all areas of life. And there's this great quote, within every adversity lies the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Within every adversity lies the seed of an equal or greater benefit. And that goes for our personal lives. I've been going through some hardship recently, and it's been very trying. But because I'm a conscious, mindful person, and because I live by that ethos, and I'm just reading it in the book, I apply it and I internalize it. Every time there's a struggle or there's pain or there's hardship, I take a pause, I let it hurt, right? And then I'm like, why did I allow this to happen? What is it about my mindset? What is it about my behavior, my habits that I attracted this negativity into my life? And what can I do in the future to avoid it? It's radical self-responsibility. There's a book by this guy, Jocko Willink, called Extreme Ownership. And it's like, take responsibility for every single thing in your life rather than blaming it on some external source. Because when we blame, when we point the finger, when we're in victim mode, we are giving away our power. But when we step into our power in a firm, grounded space, and we say, I am responsible for everything in my life, every single thing, even the challenges, even the drama, even the people that are bitter and resentful towards me, I've attracted them. I'm going to learn those lessons, I'm going to learn from them, and I'm going to do everything I can to become the best version of myself. It's becoming like a superhuman when you can tap into that space, because if struggle and adversity happens, and it just like, it doesn't break you. And I know that there's a lot of people that have felt broken through all this COVID hysteria, and it's like there's threats against springing up here and there. Well, to be honest, it was one of the best recruiting things that ever happened for our Freedom Cell network. Like Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, Anthony Fauci, they're the best players on our team. They're just going out and bringing all sorts of folks. Really, before COVID, we had 1,000 people in our Freedom Cell network, and now we have 40,000 people. So, not that I'm wanting another COVID lockdown, I mean, it's crazy and stuff, right? So, that same principle of every adversity lies within it, the equal or greater benefit. It applies to what we're doing together as a community. So, like I said, I started with saying I feel extremely grateful to be alive right now because I get to participate in the animating contest of freedom. I want to encourage you guys to adopt that mindset as well. Those folks, the New World Order, the Klaus's, the Schwabs, they all have to use manipulation and deceit and deception. What?
The Klauses, the Schwabs.
The Klauses and the Schwabs, the Bills and the Gates, the Joes and the Bidens. Although he's like a puppet, like. Oh my God. I'm not a Trump guy either, but I sure like watching Trump pick on all these clowns. My kid was like, you know, I don't like Trump either, but I definitely like him better than Biden. He was just so funny. He sure was entertaining. That's right. Those guys have no power. They only have the power that we give to them. And to be honest, I don't think they deserve to tie up my attention. I got bigger things to do. Which brings me to the power of setting goals and having control over your life. I want to really encourage people, if you're not a goal setter, it makes a dramatic difference in the quality of life and the freedom that you create, the success, the wealth, abundance. Whenever we don't have goals or a destination or a purpose, as Napoleon Hill calls it, a definiteness of purpose, a defining purpose that we align ourselves with. Like my lovely wife, her purpose on this planet, even before we met, was to create a replicatable eco-community model so we can populate communities all throughout the world. I was like, dang, that's pretty sexy. Yeah, all right. My purpose is to help create an environment for our freedom community where we can experience political autonomy and we can self-govern. Self-governance is the best form of government. And so if you have that defined purpose, a definiteness of purpose, if you've laid out goals that will help you to achieve and fulfill that purpose, whenever something springs up over here, a debate, an argument, drama, the latest conflict in the Middle East, this, that, or the other, sure, let's pause, let's reflect on it. What can we learn from it? And let's say a prayer for everybody that's being harmed in those instances. But we can stay laser focused on our goals, because if we don't have these goals, we don't have a definiteness of purpose, then we find ourselves in a reactionary paradigm where our time, our energy is dictated by our enemies. So like we're responding to the latest crisis and we're arguing over what's in the vaccine, is it graphene, and what's gonna happen on October 4th. October 4th, I heard that my brother was like, October 4th, the Japanese are doing a drill as well, North Korea's doing these weapons. He's like convinced that there's gonna be a China-US conflict. He's so convinced of it that he like almost wants it to happen so he can say, I told you so. And then other people are like, no, the graphene's gonna get activated by the 5G signals, there's gonna be a whole zombie population. And even the people that didn't take the vaccines, the chemtrails been spraying that stuff in the sky, we're all gonna get activated on October 4, turn your phone off! So me and guys did that, it's okay. But me, I was like, all right, this is kind of entertaining to watch everybody freak out no matter what, all the different theories. But I got shit to do. I don't have time to speculate over what's going to happen on October 4th because I got a good feeling that October 4th, 2023 is going to be the same as October 4th, 2022. Big nothing burger. And come to find out, that's what happened. But the less that you're focused on your goals, the easier it is to get taken for a ride, okay? And so I'm gonna encourage people to be like a horse with blinders on, where like there's all this craziness and chaos happening out here, but you're just like, I gotta get my food going, and I'm gonna get my family prepared, and I'm gonna find more freedom people, and together we are going to live our best lives, and there's nothing anybody can do to stop us, because I'm not even paying attention to the nonsense going on in the world. Does that sound like a good way of life? Yeah. Okay. So, do I got like 8 more minutes? I'm gonna take my full 50 minutes. We'll start at 5
This has
minutes.
been recording for 40 minutes.
Oh, sweet. All right, let's keep going. So, it's all about how do we get from here to there. And at Live Free Academy, so we started this company called Live Free Academy, and the purpose of this company is, any Live Free Academy folks? You know, all right, cool. I salute you if you've survived the onslaught of emails that we sent. We do a daily email newsletter, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. Yeah.
A day.
There's like 36,000 people that have survived
An
to
hour.
it. But there's like 50,000 that have unsubscribed. That's all right. You're not committed if you can't take the emails. Yeah. The emails will continue until sales improve. All right. So at Live Free Academy, we have this empowerment framework, and it's something that I've kind of taken and condensed down from all the various success literature and speakers, the Jim Rohns and the Tony Robbinses of the world, right? And it's a 4-part framework, and I want to teach it to you guys, and I want you to instill it within, because it's something that can help you to create success in any area of life, whether it's bringing the money together, whether it's getting yourself out of a rut, whether it's healing a broken relationship, or whether it's creating greater freedom for yourself, or collectively, if it's creating a free society. So this 4-part framework goes like this. The first piece is to have a sovereign mindset. And by that, I mean to control your mind, right? We're all like, mind control, MK Ultra, it's a bad thing, but if you inflict mind control upon yourself, it's actually very, very powerful. Because more often than not, what I've found in my work trying to help other people to learn Bitcoin or to leave the city and pull the money together, it's not the government, it's not the Bills and the Gates or the Klauses and Schwabs. It's our own internal limiting beliefs that stop us from achieving our goals. So for example, we're like, hey, you know, we got this idea, it's called exit and build. Let's exit the smart cities, that's where all the tyranny is being rolled out, the surveillance society, the smart city agenda, and let's build community and buy land in the country. Let's own the land underneath our feet. And people are like, John, that sounds great, but you know, Klaus Schwab said we'll own nothing and be happy. I can't possibly get land, they're just gonna take it away. And they're gonna send in the UN blue helmets to take away the land. I'm like, man, I'm just thinking about our neighbor. He's a veteran, he's an older gentleman, he's got tons of guns and an itchy trigger finger, and he doesn't have too many more years on this planet. I'm sure that he would be overjoyed to die defending his land from the United Nations. Like, he's a great guy. By the way, we were like walking in our backyard, he comes up in his tractor, he's like, hey, real quick, I gotta ask you something. You guys aren't taking that shot, are you, that jab? I'm like, no, we're definitely not. He's like, yeah, we're not either. You know, for religious reasons, it's the mark of the beast. That's my guy. So like, they're gonna take our land. I was like, that ain't happening here in Texas. Ain't no World Economic Forum stooge intellectual coming to take our land, right? Even like the Texas police and the law enforcement, especially you go to the small town, they're usually from the small town. Some of the small town cops go patrol the big cities, but in the small town folks. And if you establish yourself, like I said, as an upstanding member of the community, then they know you. They don't want to pull a gun on you because you're standing up for your right to own your land, right? So people always come up with these excuses. oh, Bitcoin, we're like, hey, you should learn to use these alternative currencies because the central bank digital currencies are being rolled out at a very rapid rate. And pretty soon there's going to be an environment where you could be shut out of the economy for going to events like Confluence, right? I got the phone there showing where we're at. So like, man, who knows how far the rabbit hole goes today, but it's definitely going there in the future. And people are like, no, Bitcoin's part of the new world order, yeah. What I've discovered is that more often than not, people have these surface level objections to things when in all reality it's their own internal insecurity. So for example, you should buy land and move out to the country. No, Klaus Schwab's gonna take the land, blah, 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 blah. Really what that translates to is I've often struggled with money and I'm really having a hard time paying rent right now. I really don't think I could pull the money together for the down payment on the property. But because admitting that to ourselves is a challenge, oftentimes we come up with these little BS excuses. That's why the mindset is so critically important. If you tell yourself, I'm not good with money, then you're not going to be good with money. Henry Ford once said, if you believe it's true or it's not, it's true. Is that right? Either way, you're right? I nailed the other quotes. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. Yeah. So if you think you can, and you're like, this is how you flip it around and you go to that anti-fragile space where the struggle actually teaches you to become better and stronger. So it's like, yes, I have struggled with money in the past, but I'm confident in my ability to pull things together because I'm a quick learner and I believe in myself. And this whole mindset thing, belief is so fundamentally important. Same thing with Bitcoin. It's part of the New World Order. They'll shut the internet down. There'll be an EMP. What if the grid goes down? Meanwhile, I'm using Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, and Venmo for all of my transactions. It's the same problem there, but in reality what that is I've always struggled with technology and I've made some silly mistakes in the past and I feel a little uncomfortable with it and I don't want to feel that discomfort. So I'm just going to make up an excuse like it's the New World Order or shut the internet down. Meanwhile, I'm using the Visa MasterCard for 98% of my purchases. It was actually a poll I did on a webinar that I did and it was 98% of the people were doing it. I recently did a workshop, Bitcoin Basics for Boomers and Beginners. And I invited folks that struggle with technology to take it with me. And I tell you what, it was a rough couple days, but we got through it. And I teach them this mindset stuff. And I'm like, this is going to be hard for you if you struggle with technology. Recognize that, and when you start to feel uncomfortable, instead of quitting, let's take a deep breath and let's work on this together. And I tell you what, at the end, when they got their first crypto, like people were just so blown away. It was a really awesome experience. Very challenging as a teacher. But it all comes back to the mindset, and that's why the mindset is the first piece of the Live Free Academy Empowerment Framework. It's important that we believe in ourselves, and also that we believe in each other, and our ability to create change internally and externally. But the mindset piece, I know that we're all, how much time do we have? 3-ish minutes. 3-ish, okay. 3-ish equals 12. All right, we just got back from the Solar Punk event. And this is a 2 festival weekend for me and the kids. We've been driving all over Central Texas. And that event was more woo. You guys know woo? That's a little woo. We're talking about Sagittarius, Capricorn stuff. So it's all woo, right? But there's this... Woo isn't bad. Woo's good. I'm in on woo. I like woo. But you can't have woo without work if you want to get shit done. Right? So woo plus work equals success. So we can't just stay in the mindset mode and the law of attraction and meditate on our life getting better and having an abundant yield. You actually got to go out and get your hands dirty in the garden, right? So the second piece of Live Free Academy Empowerment Framework is to have a strategy. To really ask questions, how am I going to get from here to there? What is this actually going to take to transition to a free society? What's it going to take to get my marriage out of a rut? What's it going to take to turn my business around? What's it going to take, right? Whatever it may be that someone's struggling with, you got to be conscious of these issues and think strategically. And when it comes to strategies, it's important to have goals and targets. All right, so mindset's first because it's most important. We're totally screwed even if we create success. We're just going to self-sabotage unless we get our mind right. Mindset, strategy. And the third piece is, let us understand that we can't do it alone. The third piece is community, working with other people. Let's come up with our plans, let's come up with our goals in life and collectively as a freedom community, and let's find other people that are willing to work on those goals along with us. And the fourth and final piece is if we want to bring about change in our lives, especially we want to bring about crazy change that's going to shift the tide of history away from centralization, coercion, control, manipulation, false flag, terrorism, you name it, and towards a life that's more in harmony with our inherent nature as free, beautiful, powerful, sovereign human beings, it's going to take the fourth piece of the Liberty Academy Empowerment Framework, which is massive action. Massive levels of action. We are talking about undoing a sinister, diabolical conspiracy that's been afoot for centuries. They don't think in terms of generations, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of elections, 4 years, 2 years. They think in terms of generations, and we have to adopt that thinking as well. Think outside the box. Stop thinking about what are we going to do, what's going to happen next month, and think about how can we sow the seeds of success for future generations so they can inherit systems and institutions that embody the philosophy of liberty instead of constantly fighting and bickering with our inferiors, okay? So massive action. And like Jim Rome said, if you want change, sometimes you gotta change. So if you guys are excited by the mission and the work that I'm sharing with you guys, I wanna encourage you to carve out time in your life to apply these principles and these practices. Maybe it means less time at happy hour. Maybe it means less time watching Netflix and more times organizing your community, more time working in the garden. But ultimately, folks, there is strength in numbers, there's strength in unity, and there's strength in truth. And I see all three of those things in this room, and I'm confident if we just stand up, we believe in ourselves, we can experience liberty in our lifetime. So thank you so much for giving me your attention. I really appreciate you guys. For being here on with that.
Thank you, John Bush. That was wonderful.